All right. Welcome everybody. Welcome to our continuing online segment where we try to keep in touch with our constituents. This is Johnny Khamis, San Jose City Council member for District number 10. And we're calling these online meetings our community connections. And my staff is standing by here to answer questions. So if you have questions that you want to ask during this segment, please text us or actually put it in the chat box, and we can start answering them. And this is our efforts to continue keep our community up to date on important issues in our district, in our city, and the services that are available to them. This week we actually have a great guest, as San Jose Police Chief Eddie Garcia, and we'll be going to him in just a little bit. But I want to give you a little bit of updates on a couple of things that if you don't get our newsletter, you're missing out on a lot of great information. Information, for example, about our virtual job fair, which is coming up on April 29th from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you have to register. And you can find that registration on sjd10.com or ask us to email you the newsletter. There's also information about boards and commissions. There's a lot of openings to serve in our community. Some of the boards aren't meeting, but the Planning Commission has 5 openings, and we're taking applications until May 3rd. And so again, please avail yourself of the newsletter. We get a lot of accolades about that newsletter. And again, my staff is also standing by. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the police chief, and I'm sure I'm going to embarrass him a little bit, but I'm going to read a little bit of his bio. Chief Garcia joined the SJPD in 1992, probably aging him a little bit, to serve in the patrol division, and was promoted to sergeant in 2000, and again to lieutenant in 2005. He was then promoted to captain, to deputy chief, to assistant chief of police, and was confirmed as chief of police in 2016. His career with SJPD has spanned over 28 years, and we're so very proud to have him. I've been proud to be serving with him, serving our community. Thank you, Chief, for joining us here today.
Thank you, council members. My pleasure, and thank you for your continued support. I don't know, but I will say it right now, the listeners that are, you have not missed a single graduation of any sort that we've had here. And I know that's one of your claim to fame, so very much appreciate your support.
No, and I'm so proud of our men in blue. Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you, we'll start with a few questions that we got from the audience in advance. How's the morale in the SJPD?
I think the morale is as good as it could be expected. I know our men and women are concerned about, I'll say this, for the first time in our careers, and we generally know that we're going to face dangers out in the street, but now here's a danger not only that we face out in the street, but a danger that we could possibly take home. And so I know that lies heavily on the minds of our men and women, but they're answering the call once again. We've said many, many times that we were going to remain fully operational as a police department. There have been other police departments throughout the country that have done a little bit less in light of COVID-19. We have not. We're taking the criminal element off the street in the same fashion that we did prior to COVID-19. I couldn't be prouder of the men and women, and also with our dispatch and our communications and our dispatchers, amazing work that they're doing. Our records personnel, really the entire civilian staff that we had, this police department has answered the call, and I couldn't be prouder.
Well, thank you. I wholeheartedly agree with that assessment. I think a lot of people are, though, concerned about the health of the police department, physical health. I know the SJPD had a lot of positive COVID-19 test results earlier. And have you seen, has there been any COVID-19 cases in our SJPD?
Well, we have, council member. What I will say, though, we started planning probably 2 or 3 weeks prior to the shelter in place, whether it be training, materials, PPE. We changed some strategies where we had officers briefing outside of the building. We have shift changes in our Bureau of Investigations, uniforms. We have going back to what I said about still taking the criminal element off the street, and instead of saying we're not going to do that or we're lightening up on that, what we did is actually instituted transport cars so that if our officers do make an arrest, their exposure to that individual suspect is lessened. So far, I'm very proud to say, and we're not out of the woods yet, but obviously, I pray every night. So far, we've had 5 department members that have tested positive, 1 civilian, 1 reserve, and 3 regular officers. And, they're all doing better. Our first case was a reserve officer who was just released from the hospital actually a couple days ago. So that's fantastic news.
That's good.
And the other dynamic that I'd like to point out as well is it's not just simply the people who tested positive. There's individuals. The testing has been fantastic that we've had, so we haven't had to quarantine as many people. We've had nearly 46 of our department members test negative, and so there's a lot of doom and gloom that's out there, a lot of negative stories that come out. But I'd like to say that we have a positive story here with regards to the health of the police department.
That's great. That's great to hear. And I know that you mentioned our dispatchers a bit ago. I just before all this the COVID-19 things started to roll, the shelter in place, we separated 311 from 911. And I was wondering, how is that program going? Are the call times, have they been lessened for 911? The hold times been lessened for 911 and 311 calls?
Well, our response times have been getting better throughout the entire year. Right now, it's a little bit early to be able to tell, what the changes have been with regards to that. Obviously, it's a different reality right now. It's really comparing apples to oranges right now with regards to the shelter in place. And I know we'll get into some crime statistics, but right now is a period of time where it's very difficult to compare call volume to other times that we've had. But I'm hopeful that it is going to have a positive impact on our call waiting times and our response times overall.
Yeah, well, I haven't had complaints about 311 for a while, so that's really good news. And
lack of complaints is always good news.
Yes, absolutely. That's what they say. No news is good news. Speaking of 311 and 911, I get this all the time. When should I call 311 and when should I call 911?
Well, I hate to oversimplify this, but if it's an emergency, you call 911. I always tell people this: when in doubt, call 911. If you're in doubt, you call 911. Now, I'll say this, particularly one of the reasons we're having a Zoom town hall because of the shelter in place and some of the health restrictions that the county has. If you have concerns over health restrictions, those are not 911 calls. Those are 311 calls. So if you see individuals that you feel are acting irresponsibly, that aren't following the order set by the county and the health department, then that's a 311 call. And I think that's a distinction that I think that's important, whether it's going into a grocery store that you don't think is practicing social distancing, or people are at a park playing basketball or doing something that you feel isn't essential, then those are 311 calls.
Well, I could tell you this, you've actually answered one of the things in one of our next questions. I saw that question come up earlier today. But let me go on to the next topic here. Many people think that crime has actually increased. Has the COVID-19 impacted crime levels? Do you have statistics that you could share with us on the crime levels in our city?
Yeah, absolutely, Councilmember. One of the things that I wanted to do when this first started is I immediately wanted to get some statistics and some data on crime trends, and usually the Part 1 crimes. Those Part 1 crimes are the major crimes. They're the homicide, the rapes, the robberies, the aggravated assaults, things of that nature. They're the burglaries, the larcenies, the stolen vehicles. Those are what are called Part 1 crimes. One of the reasons why that's an important benchmark is the more major the crime, the less chance that it gets underreported. Right? You walk out of your house and your car's stolen, you're not just going to walk to work without calling the police. You're going to call the police. You get robbed. If you're unfortunate to get robbed, if you get burglarized, the more odds of you calling. So it's important for us to have that benchmark. And so what we wanted to do since day one of the shelter in place is really start comparing these week to weeks to the same time period last year. So, I'll tell you, it has had a significant impact. on our Part 1 crimes of a major reduction. And I guess, and I'll say this as I go through the numbers, some of the statistics, I'll tell you, listen, if you're a victim of a crime, that, what I'm about to say won't assuage, what you're going through. And I, very much apologize. And again, there's no one that wants to do more for this city and this department at the men and women that wear this uniform. But, overall, our Part 1 crimes are down nearly 30%, from the time period that the shelter in place was placed until we had to stop it. I was till April 18th. So from March 15th to April 18th, so for over a month, our violent crime is down in that time period by 22%. Our property crime is down approximately 28%. And a grand total, again, is all for Part 1 crimes. And those are the crimes that get reported out every year to the Department of Justice that cities go through, and those get reported to the FBI. And, it has had a positive impact on our crime statistics, although we always have to keep an eye on certain areas in that.
Well, I know that you shared some statistics with my office, and we'll put them up in our next newsletter and make those available to the public. But I did hear, things like businesses are being robbed now. I know that home burglaries are down, but businesses, schools, I've been hearing maybe incidental information or something that businesses crimes, robberies, or burglaries for businesses have gone up, and burglaries on schools have gone up. Is that true, or is that?
Well, I think one of the things is I think we're all very sensitive. My men and women, obviously, we've been coming to work every day since this started. But I think the fact that we're home more and have a lot more time to see social media and watch the news, I think we're a little bit more sensitive to when these issues arise, because, our home residential burglaries are down about 30% comparing the two time periods. And our commercial burglary is actually down about 1% compared to last year. Mm-hmm. Now, I would, one of the things that I'll say is commercial burglary is an area that I wish was trending a lot lower than than it is compared to the other crimes we've had. And so we've seen, I guess, comparatively speaking, we've seen that is an area of concern that we have. I'm not going to tell you that they've gone up because the numbers don't bear that out, but we know that there have been some businesses that have been hit. There have been some restaurants that have been hit. There have been some schools that have been hit. And, I'll give you an example for the schools that have been hit. It's been some juvenile suspects. Really, we feel that they've been crimes of more of opportunity. There haven't really been, a sophisticated plan to go into a school and get computer products and things of that nature. It's really people have gone to the schools and grabbing what they can grab. We've made, I've said this to many town halls in your community, that 100 different burglaries aren't committed by 100 different people. We've arrested some individuals responsible for those burglaries, but that's certainly an area that we're going to keep an eye on. We've been reaching out to our school districts and advising them, that, we can't treat our schools now that that school's not in session as storage places for expensive equipment, and making sure that we send that message out. But we're continuing to do premise checks, and our officers combined with school liaison are doing premise checks. I mean, we have approximately 280 schools in the city. So it's difficult to be at every single one, but we're doing our best to have our footprint at most of the schools right now.
Well, thank you for doing that, Chief. And I know that we've been so proud of your work in rebuilding our police department. I know that we are heading into some financial problems in this coming year because of the COVID virus. And most people don't know that a lot of the tax revenues that come in to the city that we spend on services like police and fire and libraries and parks actually comes from sales taxes, from business taxes, from property taxes, and from revenues, that are business related. And we're going to have a huge, I think the mayor was talking 100 million yesterday. How do you think that the shortfall will affect your efforts to rebuild our police department. Can you tell us a little bit more about staffing levels and where do you what's going to happen?
Well, you know what, it's definitely an area of concern. I mean, like to your point, we've spent the last 5 years rebuilding the police department, and we were heading in a very good trajectory. Obviously, to the point that you said, I mean, we're going to have to tighten our belts a little bit, and with that, you know, our hire ahead program is going to take a hit. You know, and one of the things that we really want to do, and my goal is to try to stay where we're at without rolling backwards. You know, because, you know, the reality of it is we're not going to be able to grow more than where we currently are. And until the financial situation stabilizes, you know, we're still getting great numbers in our academy classes, which is one of the things that's kept us afloat. People still want to be police officers here. We just restarted one of our biggest academy, just restarted yesterday. We're excited about that. We're hoping that they graduate into June. But because of the COVID-19 situation that we're in, we're really only able to run one academy at a time, and we can't overlap because it's just too many people in the current environment that we're in until some of the sanctions get eased. But the officers or the recruits are excited. They're happy to be here. And again, you know, luckily the hard work that all of us did, you included, with our unions and our officers and our recruiting team, you know, I always, you know, we wanted to get over the goal line. We wanted to get our authorized staffing to be higher than 1151 than where we're at. But, you know, obviously the train, you know, I'll use the train stalled in Kansas right now. But, you know, because of all the hard work that's been done, it's going to take a while for it to come to an absolute complete stop. So our street level ready officers will go up a little bit by about 40 or 50 in October, but then we'll stop growing. And so my hope is that we don't have as many retirements as are forecasted, because the retirements obviously hurt as well. And so we're just doing our best to do all the non-financial things we can do to keep morale high. But in the end, you know, really it's going to come down to our retirements, and hoping we don't suffer as many retirements as are projected.
Well, I certainly hope that you stay around for for a while, Chief. You've been a great chief as far as that's concerned. I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to take some live questions here. I've already gotten one live, actually two live comments that I'll bring to your attention in a second, Chief. But April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and tell us a little bit more about your partnership with the YMCA on the campaign to prevent domestic violence and child abuse.
Well, thank you. We're really proud of our endeavor. It's actually with the YWCA, and we've partnered with the YWCA and on a new campaign that's aimed at preventing domestic and child and sexual abuse while families are sheltered in place at home during COVID-19. While we have not seen spikes in these crimes as of yet, we have to be proactive in our approach, as we know that these crimes, even outside of COVID-19, are underreported. There's going to be a new series of public service video that have been co-produced by us and the YWCA, and paid ads on social media platforms that are funded through a YWCA grant. In addition to running the PSAs, you know, throughout San Jose, we're going to target areas that, in additional paid ads through the grants, as we see spikes and reported abuse. These PSAs contain messages for abusers, adults, and child victim survivors, and highlighting the resources that continue to be available throughout this shutdown, and the consequences for abusers from the criminal justice system, and the full support of District Attorney Rosen as we do that. So it's a series of PSAs. You know, as a matter of fact, we sent them to your office earlier today to put out as well. And again, it's a message that we have to send loud and clear. It's something that is absolutely not going to be tolerated. I don't want people to think that there's any excuse whatsoever. And I've said this before, and I've done media interviews with regards to, listen, I get the stress. Our community has been hit hard by the shutdown, not just from an emotional standpoint, but an economic standpoint. And those things cause a lot of distress in a household. However, that is not an excuse and will never be an excuse for violence. And so if those PSAs, if someone, before you do something that is going to draw my attention and my officer's attention, and you will go to jail, you need to go cool off and go walk around the block or do what you got to do. But also for survivors to know that we're here, we're fully operational, we're going to get them help. This police department, this criminal justice system, regardless of what we're going through right now, is not going to leave them.
Wonderful, Chief. And so I'm going to start taking questions from the public. I already have 3 that have lined up. This one is from Johnny Calley. Has SJPD noticed an increase in speeding of vehicles, disregarding red lights or stopping, etc.? He says personally he's seen a lot more speeding on Almaden and Blossom Hill and Snell. What are you doing to address these issues?
Well, like we always have, one of the things that we're really involved in is, we're trying to stop fatalities, with our Vision Zero plan. And so our number one priority, we still have to remember, is to the point that you said earlier, as we were growing up until this point. One of the things and one of the goals that we had was to grow our traffic enforcement unit. I say this, in 2009, we had over 40 motor officers riding around the city of San Jose. 11 years later, I have 10. And so, we need to really concentrate on the areas of great need. And those tend to be our areas, our corridors that have high rates of fatalities. But that doesn't mean that working through the captain, that we certainly can't have patrol officers staff certain areas. Obviously, with this shelter in place, there should be a lot less cars on the road than there were before. And so if there's areas of concern, I would say to work either through your office or the captain for the division to see what proactive measures, we can take.
That'd be great. We still get a lot of complaints about speeding, and I've seen horrendous accidents on Camden. Let me go to my next question from TJ Mai. My daughter, her daughter's applying to the SJPD and is hoping for the June Academy. Is the June Academy still on?
That's a fantastic question. One of the things that I have to say is, as long as the sanctions are in place with the county and COVID, that's an area that we need to be careful with, because normally we would have both academies overlapping. So as one academy is ready to graduate, the other one could start in its place. But because of what we're going through from a health perspective, we're really trying to minimize the amount of people that are at the training center. And so what we're saying is, if the academy doesn't start in June, those individuals that have been hired that start the academy, as soon as we can start, we're going to start them. And so really, we're at the mercy as well of COVID-19 to dictate how we're going to move forward. But again, congratulations if she's starting the academy, which is fantastic. We're lucky to have her, and I've been here nearly 3 decades, and I much hope that when she begins, she's going to have a great near 30-year career as well. So congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, and thank you and your daughter for serving our community, or wanting to serve our community. Let me see. I have a question here from Ginny. Oh, Baird. That has nothing to do with you, Chief, but they're thanking me for the goats. Understood. Love having the goats in our hills. Thank you, Johnny and Chief. Hearing from you both is much appreciated. And this is from Kevin J. Let me go on to if please love the comments. Don't get me wrong, but let me see if we can get some questions for our chief. I do have several more that came in a few days ago. This question is from Facebook. Kim, it's about social gatherings. My neighbors have continued to have parties and social gatherings. I don't want to get them into trouble with the law, but I also want them to follow the shelter-in-place orders. What are my options the next time they have a large social gathering?
Well, I think part of it, and something that the governor had mentioned earlier when this started, is really the peer pressure that we need to put on people to do the right thing. I don't want my officers involved in having to go tell people to social distance and get outside. It's a really complicated issue. And one of the things, we've come so far, council member, with regards to community trust, that we really, as police departments nationally, not just in San Jose, really have to be careful in the manner in which they enforce the stay orders. But obviously, if there's an event that shouldn't be occurring, absolutely call 311. I will tell you this: since the day that the shelter in place started, we have specific patrol vehicles. We send out 8 officers during day shift, and we send 8 officers during swing shift, who all they do is either proactively or in response to calls for service respond to the health order violations. So, and those officers obviously, are trained and can handle that issue and that problem as well.
Wonderful. And we just got a question from Roger Miller. How many inmates have been released from county jail due to the COVID virus outbreak? And have you seen any increase in crime due to this? There was an example from another county where an inmate was rearrested within minutes after being released.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a multifaceted part question. Listen, I get and I realize that our jails needed to reduce their population because of this outbreak. I get that. I don't run the jail. I don't know how many necessarily have been released. I know that at the period of time that individuals were being released with lower level crimes that were very close to their release date as it was, and those individuals were being released. But really what I'll tell you, and I'm being very honest, and I'm not a fan of it at all, but the zero bail policy that's throughout the state is not something that keeps our communities very safe. I'll tell you, we had an individual just last week that was released on the zero bail based on this new pandemic policy. And that individual promptly committed a carjacking and assault with a deadly weapon after a judge had deemed them to be released from zero bail, who should have never been out. And people talk about those as being one-offs and, you can't, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, the problem is, tell that to the victims of that individual. Because I certainly don't want to tell them that. And one of the interesting things about it that people haven't read the fine print either is that the zero bail order is unless it's taken back by judicial order, is supposed to stay in effect for 90 days after the emergency has been called off. So for 3 months after we're no longer in an emergency, which I don't know when that will be, that zero bail will still be in effect. It's something that I am concerned about and something that we'll continue to highlight. But as far as the lower level crimes and individuals that were soon to be released, those issues, if the jails have to have to lower their population, so be it. But surely we need to find room for individuals that are serious offenders that are causing harm to our community. And I'll stand behind that every step of the way.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I've also been with you on some of the concerns that I had with previous legislation that will let a lot of our, basically decrease the penalties for some of these crimes, like assaulting police officers and date rape, like Prop 57 did. I am concerned about that, and I think we all should be looking to the November ballot where some of these fixes will be addressed in a ballot measure. I have another call here. A question here from Vincent C. How are our San Jose police officers protecting themselves when having to interact with the public?
Well, the way they're protecting themselves is we have PPE that the officers use. Obviously, from masks to gloves to face shields that are available to the officers. Again, they may not be as they may not speak to individuals as closely as they used to. They'll stand back a little further. They report their temperatures to their supervisors, a couple times a day during their shift. We have transport cars available to lessen the the interaction and lessen the exposure to individuals. But listen, at the end of the day, we can't social distance. We can't stay sometimes 6 feet apart from people. We're doing our best to mitigate the possibility of exposure for our officers. But at the end of the day, if we have to take someone into custody that's COVID positive, then we have to take someone into custody that's COVID positive. We're doing our best to keep our officers safe. But at the end of the day, there is not 100%, there's not 100% shield that's going to keep our officers. We're doing the best we can, but these officers realize they have a very difficult job, and they have been tremendous in answering the call.
Thank you, Chief. And I know it's next to impossible to keep 100% safe. It's just a risk that all police officers and first responders face, and thank you for doing that. The next question is about hate crime video the SJPD posted. This question is from Sarah. Has there been an increase in hate crimes, and what can we do to help our neighbors feel safer?
Well, that's a great question. I very much appreciate it. And really that lends to the point that I've made with the district attorney with District Attorney Rosen on other town halls that we've had, is the spirit of our community. The fact that we want to help people, that we have not had spikes in hate crime. And one of the reasons is because our community is so together that we just don't put up with that. We don't put up with hate. This police department never has and never will. I know a lot of times people have talked about, are our policies different now in handling hate crimes than they were before based on COVID-19? And the reality of it is no. We have always taken hate crime seriously, always, and we're continuing to in this part. What I would say from helping our community for people to feel safe is really, if in the rare case there is some type of crime revolving hate, or even a hate incident, okay, even a hate incident that's not necessarily a crime, but definitely an incident that's sparked by hate, is really to give someone some security, call the police, be the best witness that you possibly can, and help them that way if that happens.
Wonderful. And if you're joining us here live, please do chat. Send me a chat. I'm getting low on questions, and I don't know how long I have you here for, Chief, but thank you for being here and entertaining questions live from our community. So how will the SJPD respond to the pressure of going back to regular business, and have there been any local protests against the shelter-in-place orders?
Well, I'll take the second question first. We have not. I know that I've seen nationally and throughout the state other protests, but we have not yet experienced that in San Jose, although it's something that we always have to prepare for. For the first part of that question, one of the great, I have a saying that I say all the time when I used to coach Pop Warner, is that you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And the reality of it is we've been operating this same exact way we were operating before COVID-19. And once this leaves, we're going to operate the exact same way. One dynamic that happens, though, is until there's a cure or until there's a vaccine, COVID-19 is going to be part of our everyday lives as a police department. So as other people go on doing other things, that's always going to be part of something that we deal with. Communicable disease is not a new thing for police departments. And so it's something that's always in the back of our minds, and we'll have to work on ways to mitigate that further. But again, when it comes to public safety, we don't have to change a thing, because we've been operating the exact same way before this, and we'll operate the exact same way, keeping our community safe after this.
Thank you, Chief. As a question about our community service officers, we refer to them as CSOs. What services are they performing during the shelter in place right now?
The CSOs are still performing the same services they did before, mostly responding to burglaries, taking those reports, doing evidence, doing traffic control, and the things that they've always done. Again, we're operating the same exact way. Our CSOs have been fantastic, answering the call as well. Again, every facet of this department has amazed me through this process, and I cannot state enough to our residents that this department, I said it when this started, is fully operational. We've remained fully operational, and we will continue to be fully operational.
Thank you, Chief. I had another question on homelessness. I know before this COVID-19 effort to get people who are homeless into shelter, you were doing enforcing warrants in encampments. Is that something? Is that something you're continuing to do?
We're continuing to do enforcement, and we're continuing to provide public safety to our homeless community. Yes, we are. There's things that again, to mitigate exposure, to mitigate possible exposure to our officers. There are obviously risk factors that we take into place, but our street crimes unit, which is the primary unit that we have to deal with the criminal type issues that may arise or may exist in our homeless encampments, is still fully operational and still doing their jobs.
Okay, I have a question here from Rebecca Boylan. How do you handle missing persons reports since people are staying inside?
How do we
handle missing person reports since people are staying inside? Is it tougher to?
No, we just handle it the same way we always have. I mean, I don't have an exact number with regards to how many missing persons we've had during this time period compared to time periods before. But and I'll say the fact that that the shelter in place, when you have missing elderly individuals, we've been successful, in recovering and really bringing those individuals to safety. But it hasn't really changed in the manner in which we've been investigating those.
Okay, so status quo. I have something here from Greg West. Can anything be done about the encampment at Highway 87 in Branham? Sorry, that's another question right after that. I know we were just talking about encampments. This is a question about one on 87 in Branham.
Well, one thing that I will say, obviously, the police department doesn't do abatements. We don't abate homeless encampments. That's done by the housing department. And so I think, they have to work through the city and the housing department to get placed on the list to get encampments abated. But certainly, if there's crime that emanates from those, then that will certainly draw our attention. However, there's crime doesn't necessarily have to be in an encampment. Being homeless in it by itself is not a crime. And so, we need to ensure that we work together really to make the entire city safer by housing our homeless community.
Well, it is, and we've stepped up our efforts dramatically. I think we've offered a shelter to, if not every single person in an encampment, because we've gotten money from the state, and we're getting hotel beds. So we are working on the encampments, and I'm hoping that a lot of more permanent solutions continue to be worked on. I had a question in regards to, is it mandatory for San Jose to wear a mask now? It's not mandatory. Do you ask your police officers to wear masks too?
We do ask them to wear masks when they're contacting people in the public. Yes.
Garcia, he continues doing housing and suspended abatements. Okay, well, this probably, Greg, this probably is a better question for myself, not the chief, about the abatements. Housing did suspend the abatements, and we are trying to go out and meet people in homeless encampments and offer them shelter. We're doing that day in and day out to see if we can get them the help that they need. I have another one from Michelle, and she asks, why does the city have no chase policy? And I think it's pertaining to speeding or something.
Actually, we don't necessarily, our officers can, I think she means, why don't we have a pursuit policy? We have a pursuit policy. We don't have a no chase policy, but the pursuit policy has to be balanced out. The crime is balanced with the risk to the community that it poses. Obviously, if someone is speeding and goes into a pursuit with a police officer, and the only reason that they're fleeing the police officer is because they're fearful or what have you, and they end up crashing into someone and killing a family, I'm going to have an issue with that. So yes, I'm proud of our pursuit policy. I think it's a responsible policy to have, but it's not a no chase policy. It just depends on the situation.
Okay. I got another question here. How is the new bail issue affecting your agency? The bail. I think you did address this a little earlier.
I addressed it earlier, but I'll give you the example. Just last week, our officers worked very hard to arrest a certain individual for crimes. He was on parole for that he went to prison for nearly 6 years. We arrested him for auto theft. We arrested him for resisting arrest and some other charges. Subsequently gets released on zero bail. And then he commits an assault with a deadly weapon and a carjacking, and that turned into a kidnapping as well. And my officer had to go back and get him again. So it's ridiculous. These decisions that some of these judges are making are outrageous. I would love for them to sit in a town hall meeting with me and this community and any community in the city of San Jose and listen to what their expectations are, because that's missing.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think I know that people are saying this is one case scenarios, but I've seen a lot more of these scenarios happen. And I'm reminded of a big bust of weapons that big cache of weapons and drugs that you caught somebody and he was out within 6 hours. That was just a couple of weeks ago, right? Or
yes, a lot of these. And here's the thing, and I've posted is, a lot of these decisions were being made before the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
I've said this and I'll say it again. I'm just seeing criminals that are causing our city harm and our community harm given more chances than our residents and our victims are. And that's outrageous, and it should be outrageous to any resident of the city.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to take two more questions here. Here's one from Esther. Are domestic violence 911 calls going up or down during the shelter-in-place order, and if so, by what percentage?
Well, again, we don't really deal with percentages too much in that in fact, we're dealing with numbers. Our calls for service have gone up, except the crimes have gone down. Our domestic violence, in this time period has gone down about 3.5%. The numbers have, but again, it's something that we know is underreported. The calls for service have risen, but the crimes themselves, we have not seen that spike that I said earlier. Having said that, that doesn't mean that we're not continuing to be proactive. I don't know if there's another crime that doesn't spike where we're doing PSAs with a community-based organization when they're not spiked. But it is such of high importance to us that that's what we feel is necessary to ensure that our survivors have an outlet and that possible abusers know the consequences. So yes, calls have gone up, that officers have gone on domestic type calls, not necessarily domestic violence, but the crimes themselves, we have not seen a spike.
Okay, and we have one from Jean Dresden. The media suggests that there is a big increase in anxiety, depression, and other mental health symptoms. When your officers get called for help and the community member is clearly struggling, what do you do? And when do you reach out for county mental health support?
Well, it really depends on the situation. I'll tell you something that I'm proud of is that, I made a commitment to the city and the residents when I took over as chief nearly 5 years ago, or going on 5. I'm in my 5th year now. I was looking forward to getting the entire department trained on CIT, crisis intervention training. So most every officer that's out in patrol has that 40-hour class where they learn how to deal with individuals that are struggling from some either type of mental illness or some type of episode. And we do have resources that we use. Working through the county and behavioral health services. We have used their rapid response team on many an occasion to help our officers and to talk someone into getting some help. Obviously, the 5150 72-hour hold, if they're a danger to self, others are gravely disabled, is a tool that the officers have as well. But we really just want to get people help, and so so that's our goal. And as I mentioned earlier, we know how difficult this has to be on our community, not simply because of the inability to go outside and do certain things, but the financial hit that our community's taken. And so our officers are well aware of that. And so tying that in with their training that they've had has been very helpful.
Thank you, Chief. And I think I'll take this one from Steve, although you've already kind of addressed this a little earlier. Our neighborhood is frustrated with speeders doing donuts. Calling 911 doesn't help. They can't be everywhere. We know they can't be everywhere. What else can we do? And I think maybe he thinks that police can't be everywhere, but.
Well, I appreciate that, because we can't be everywhere. But calling 911, especially now, in these times, is something that I think we can get to and we can do. One of the things when we talk about people doing donuts and sideshows and other things of that nature, the ordinance, the spectator ordinance that, thank you, Councilmember, that you voted in, that was passed a few months back, has had a big deterrent factor. We don't see what other cities have seen with regards to street racing, because we've taken a very serious stance to it. We monitor social media. We see when these events are occurring. We try to be proactive and set up our racer detail teams to combat that. We utilize our helicopter in Air 3 to do that. But honestly, the best thing you can do, there's not much you can do other than be a good witness and call the police. And we'll get there. And we'll get there as quickly as we can. And
is that a 911 or a 311 call when you see?
I'd call 911. We've seen those instances oftentimes turn violent. So, and not to say if cars out of control and driving that recklessly, there's going to be lives at risk. So yes, certainly I would say that's a definitely 911 call.
Well, I'm going to make this the final question, Chief. I want to thank all those who joined with us on Zoom. And I want to really thank the Chief. I know he's made time out of his extremely busy schedule to be here at 7:30 in the evening. So how can residents help the SJPD?
You know what? Well, just continuing to be supportive. I've seen this, I'll tell you. I've seen, whether it's on our Facebook posts or social media, the support that this police department has gotten through this pandemic has just been overwhelming. I can tell you, I've shared some messages that have been left on Facebook with the rank and file. It's times like these. This is why we're here. I know we're human beings and we have to come to work and we have the same struggles others do, but being here in these times is why we raised our right hands, is to be here for our community during these times. So just empathy for us, knowing how we're rising again as a police department, patience, appreciation really does go a long way. And oftentimes I'll say this, when I'm at council meetings, and I've said this at your town hall meetings before, Councilmember, when I'm at town hall meetings, oftentimes you have the individuals that have a negative type of reaction to a law enforcement officer or a police officer in San Jose, and very rarely do you hear the individuals that have positive stories to say about the San Jose Police Department. And I know they're there, whether it's a simple email or a call to your office, or please send it, because it's important for our officers to know and to hear the appreciation. They're going to do their jobs anyway, but to hear that they're appreciated. This is an amazing workforce. I couldn't be prouder of all our men and women, and I just hope everyone appreciates them as much as I do.
Well, you're getting appreciations right now via text. We just got one. We got one from Hayat. Thank you, Chief, for your time, and Johnny for what you do for the community. Well, we thank you too for tuning in. And honestly, I think especially, I can only tell you about my district because I've been here for 7.5 years. I know that our community respects the work that you and our fine officers do for us, and every single day. So thank you, Chief, for being here with us, and please stay safe and healthy, and please give our best to the entire SJPD.
Thank you, Councilmember. Again, as I opened up the meeting, thank you for your continued support. God bless, and please, everyone stay safe and stay healthy.
All right. And before this visit comes to an end, I want to make sure that you know that you can always log on to sjd10.com for updates and check with us on my newsletter. Of course, you know I'm on Facebook because you're there right now. And I often post things on Facebook and Twitter and even LinkedIn. We're trying to get into all social media. We're going to continue practicing social distancing. So please, our community events here. And so please join me on Sunday at 3 p.m. for relaxation and afternoon stretches. So it's going to be fun. I don't know how we're going to film this yet. We're still working out the details. And again, on Thursday, April 30th at 7 p.m. with special guest, Councilmember-elect Matt Mahan, who actually, and so we want to discuss getting back to business, and we're looking forward to seeing Matt, who's going to follow in my footsteps as your next city council member. So tune in on the 30th of April as well. Thank you again for joining me, and have a wonderful evening.